So before I hand over to the far more interesting events for today, I just wanted to welcome everyone to Nature and Climate House. Bellwethers is an organisation that we set up. It's a not-for-profit. We set it up just over a year ago with an intent of expanding the volume of leaders for forging a nature and climate economy. Nature and Climate House is a travelling clubhouse that really is a space where we want leadership to find its voice on all of the many, many, many tricky and difficult challenges involved in a transition. All transitions will be bumpy, but no transitions will take place without leadership. So without further ado, let me introduce our partners for today. This was such a fitting partnership to close the final day at South by Southwest London for Nature and Climate House. We opened this week with heads of government, with the UK's Climate Minister Kerry McCarthy, Brazil's ambassador to the UK. We've had Mary Cray, the UK's Nature Minister. We've had lots of important people in business and corporations, and yet they will not be able to forge a true and just transition without folks like the next gang you're going to see. So we are deeply honoured to welcome One World or None as the folks who are leading the cultural revolution, pushing for the voice of citizens and new kinds of democratic structures that may just be the secret sauce to enabling what we've all been struggling to do for decades. So with that in mind, may I welcome Jamie Kelsey.
What a pleasure to be here. Oh, great. This is one of the ones where you can't see anyone at all. So in that case, you have to make a sound. Has anyone been here over the past 4 days? What a team running this joint. And they're still standing, which is such an amazing feat of endurement. Is that a real word? Anyway, I'm gonna take you on a journey. It's my journey, and it's generally interesting, you know. That's one of the big bits for me. 2011, 3,500 people turned up outside St Paul's Cathedral for a movement called Occupy. Do you know Occupy? Yeah. So, yeah. Do you know Radiohead? Yeah. That was the first day, and round about here was the mic. That's Kathy Brannan going, come on up the front. And there's like thousands of us. It's the best backdrop ever. And all it was listening to each other. And, you know, you could tell that was quite a big threatening thing because we were listening to each other in a really well-balanced way. There were no voices dominating. These conversations were what you call participatory democracy. So all voices get heard equally and no voices dominate. That alone made a big difference to what we're used to. And one of the things that got me every bloody day is middle-class, middle-aged white guy from Bromley. And everyone gets 2 minutes on the mic, and I'm sitting there, and I see a lot of people like me getting the microphone and quoting Foucault or Deleuze or whatever, and quite a few of the hands, I don't know who those are, by the way, and quite a lot of people waving their little hands, going, hooray, good point, well made. And then up comes Tammy Samid, Lambert and Butler in one hand, microphone in the other. Oh, I'm fucking terrified, but I've got to say this. She had 5 kids, left school at 13, half her life in hostels. The opposite to privileged. And there was something about her speaking that, honestly, it was like, for us all, it was like the angels singing. I can't exactly name it. There's not the real proper language, but man, there was this visceral cracking in the air, and there was a forest of hands at the end. Because it was visceral politics. She was coming from here. She wasn't confident. She wasn't articulate. She wasn't educated. It wasn't an intellectual endeavor at all. And it moved all of us. And I saw this happen every day. Not just Tammy, there's thousands and thousands and millions of Tammys around the whole world. And what happens is the power of people who have no agency, when they find their agency, they are the bomb. And I started believing, and I still do, they will change the world. So here's a couple of other Tammys. Check this guy out. Can you imagine being Jimmy? Jimmy. He'd been living, oh, everyone's going hooray for bloody everything. That's fantastic. Okay, let's hear it for Jimmy. He'd love it. So Jimmy was living up the top of those steps at St. Paul's. At the top of the steps on the left, there's a little enclave. He'd been living there for 7 years. So he was a rough sleeper and a drinker. And so he wakes up one morning and there's 3,500 people in his house. And he took it quite well, actually. But we learned a hell of a lot from Jimmy. So Jimmy was totally not seeing himself as an occupier or a political character in any way whatsoever, right? But he knew how to cook, so he came and joined the kitchen. I don't know if you guys know this. We lived there for 4.5 months, right? There was a whole camp all around there. So he was in the kitchen, and he slowly got to trust us. And, you know, he said this every day. He said, look, I've lived on the streets for 7 years, man. People can't see you. You know, you're there asking for money. They just see through you. You're invisible. No one cares at all. You people, not only do you care, but you listen to me, and you hug me, and you hold me. No one's done that for me for 7 years. And he's chopping carrots one day, and we had this right dilemma. So assemblies, let's go back to Jim. Assemblies are where we make decisions collectively, thousands of people, all voices heard equally. And we made loads of decisions, but the hardest one was the fact that that land was owned by the City of London Corporation, and they said, I will give you a deal. As long as you leave by December 31st, we'll let you stay. And I tell you, having meetings on this, because it was the winter, your ass got real cold on those steps, man. And day 3 of these assemblies, what do we do about the City of London Corporation? Jimmy's cutting carrots, and he says, I won't try and do a Scottish accent, but he says, what we should do is issue counter demands against them. Dead right. You've got to go to the assembly. You've got to tell the assembly, oh, I can't. So he ends up going to the assembly that night. He suggests this forest of hands. And and amazingly, someone interviewed him, and there's this brilliant monologue from him saying what that did to him. Until that day, I was a rough sleeper and I was an alcoholic. But I'm a dad, I'm a fullback, I'm a welder, I'm a cook, and I'm an occupier. His whole sense of self was totally transformed by being listened to. And he had the best idea out of everyone in the camp. This geezer, all right, so he comes up to me. We were outside, we were Oxford Circus, doing a big demonstration with disabled people against cuts. He comes up to me. I'd been on television that morning. Oi, Jamie, I saw you on TV. And I'm looking at him. Look at him, for God's sakes, terrifying. And he said, I know what you're thinking. I'm not an undercover cop. And I was going, okay. He said, can I have a coffee? So I meet him. Steve Barron, his name was. And he said, I'm from the EDL. So the EDL is the English Defence League, right? So a seriously fascist organisation. But I've been bringing my kid down to your assemblies for the past 3 months. And what you're all saying has changed everything for me. We've been told that the whole problem in this country are people of colour, are immigrants, are LGBTQ, are the students, are the commies. Does this ring a bell? So this was 2011. There's a lot of Steves now. But I've brought my daughter here and we've listened to the assemblies and we've been lied to. I've got a proposal. What's the proposal, Steve? I'd like to go to all 5 EDL meetings in Essex and tell them they've got it wrong, that they should stop believing this and actually join Occupy. Well, you've got to go to the assembly and tell them, Steve. So that was an amazing assembly. I'll never forget it because there's thousands of us and he stands there, he tells his story. You know, I was EDL, I'm sorry, I've learned from you. We've been given enemies that aren't real. The economic system we should come together and address. And I'm going to go to all 5 EDL meetings, and I'm going to tell them they've got it wrong, and they should then join Occupy. And it's amazing, because loads of people are putting their hands up. They're going, good idea, but we're not going with you, mate. And he went, and he got beaten up in 3. But a large amount of people who had followed that ideology got it from Steve that they had been lied to. It's wrong. And joined us. And they were plumbers and fire workers and firefighters and people with occupations that helped the camp run really well. So this experience was a big deal for me. As you can tell, because I'm quite passionate about it. And I'm not an intellectual. I don't know who Foucault is and the other one, Deleuze. But I do know what humanity feels like in here really well. So then it brings me to, I've run about 300 people's assemblies since then. I've set up community groups using people's assemblies. And there is something magical, without a doubt. You know, when people who don't get heard don't feel like their voice matters. When they're heard, they're exquisite. We are an extraordinary species. We are capable of extraordinary things. And this is where you learn it. So then I hope you don't mind me walking up and down in a self-important way. So then I build on this and discover these things, citizens' assemblies, which is what this is all about. So they've been going for, 20 years. The modern form of citizens' assemblies has been going for 20 years, and you're going to learn a lot more about it shortly. But they are a sophisticated way of bringing people together, like jury service. And think about how much we trust juries, by the way. But the group that gets brought together through a kind of lottery thing, the group that we end up with is representative, according to ethnicity, age, gender, economic background, geography. It's always a snapshot of us. This is not a snapshot of us. This is pretty affluent. It's Friday. Most people are at work. And then those people get given all the information of an issue, and then they deliberate, and then they come up with their solutions. And I'm telling you now, every time, the people are way ahead of the politicians, because they can be. So I started getting really into this. And then Extinction Rebellion happened, and until that time, I'd shouted at a lot of buildings, folks. I'd shouted at a lot of buildings up and down this whole world. And I've shifted entirely into culture. This story that we're sharing with you today has to arrive in people's lives through popular culture, not through some smart-ass article in The Guardian, not through some incredibly complicated academic paper or a feature in The Economist, but through things like this. So I'm going to come back to this, but look at that. We're doing a feature film. We're encouraging this community assembly culture. We're making a mobile game. You're going to find out about that later. We're running a social media campaign that is just to die for, guys, but I can't share too much now. We're training participants. After this meeting, I'm going to Cumbria. We're training participants. Tomorrow, I'm going to have a load of people who've just been in assembly on BBC and ITV. We're building a global artist network. We've already got 150 artists in 20 countries. A reality TV show like Political Gogglebox or Big Brother Meets Question Time. Anyway, let's go back to this. So when we're doing Extinction Rebellion, it would be really cool if I just went, so I'm doing quite well, and then falling over would be, that was a bit of a weird one. Anyway, so climate, and here we are on Bellwethers. God bless Bellwethers. God bless Bellwethers, ladies and gentlemen. All right. So climate is, look, I'm 60. So when I was a kid, we had MAD. Do you know this? How old are you? You're about 42. He was a plant in the audience. Mutually assured destruction. Okay? In other words, we knew atom bombs existed. Some crazy leader might press the button, might. But climate collapse, there's no might. This entire world is going to change in front of our eyes, and you know that. That's why you're here. That's why Bellwethers exists. This issue has to be dealt with by humanity. So it was a natural thing to get involved in a project that was the world's first ever global citizens' assembly, which I started with 2 total geniuses in 2020. And then we did it in 2021. We ended up presenting at five events in the Blue Zone in the famous Glasgow COP. And this is what it looked like. Look at these cats. That's the human family. Okay, we did this crazy democratic lottery algorithm thing on the entire world, random longitude and latitude, mixed with population density. So, I mean, I've never been on the edge of my seat for an algorithm, but when we press go, watched 18 points land in China, 17 in India, 14 in Africa, 1 in Coventry, 1 on an island off Yemen called Socotra, and then I zeroed in on Coventry. We were on a road in Coventry. And the gig was we connect with community groups within 50 miles of that point, onboard them to the Global Assembly, and they have to go and find 6 people who are strangers. So we've got photographs of people in India being stopped in the streets and in Thailand, etc. And then so each of those 100 groups found 6 people, press algorithm number 2, we boiled it down to 100. 10% of this beautiful family. 10% of this beautiful family have no formal education. And we very quickly learnt they were more often than not much wiser than the people who had. 70% are living on $10 or less a day, 50% are women, 13% are white. I was in breakout groups because it was during COVID, so it was online, using Zoom, translators, note takers, facilitators. And I wept, but I was observing, thank God, because it's kind of embarrassing. You know, they've come from around the world. They're trying to deal with the climate crisis, and there's an old punk from Bromley weeping. So that was lucky, wasn't it, really? So the cameras were off and the microphone was off. Why did I weep? Why did you weep, Jamie? Go on, ask me. Why did you weep, Jamie? Why do you want to know? Because I saw, hallelujah, testify, I saw our default mode is love and compassion and a willingness to cooperate and a desire for our children to live in peace. That's who we are. We're an extraordinary species. We're exquisite. You know, what got me for a while was how the hell did we get so lucky to find this, to have a goat herder from Socotra in a breakout group with an 18-year-old student from Wuhan, an elderly seamstress from Brazil, and a social worker from Coventry, and a poor farmer from Congo. How the hell did we manage to get the luck to find people who all were absolutely full of love and compassion? How did we get that lucky? And then the day dawned. Oh, that's actually who we are. Changed my life. So what do you do about it? You tell everybody. It has to arrive in your lives through the game that we're going to talk to you about, through television, through all the countries we're working in, through this feature film that we're making. And we're making seriously beautiful artists. I'm not going to drop names because I'm getting on with you quite well, but I hate it when people do that. So, but they're really good names. Oh, I'll give you one, because this was just yesterday. So does that, it's an age thing, kids, ladies and gentlemen. But no, I used to be a teacher, so it's quite easy for me to make that slip. Look, the fact is, we spent 4 hours last night having an interview, or a beautiful conversation, actually, between one of the absolute pioneers in citizens' assemblies, who you're going to meet very soon, called Jane Souter, and, drum roll, Delia Smith. Okay, some people know her. She's basically the original superstar of the kitchen. Superstar. And she is in love with this. It's spiritual for her. This is the only way, and we've got it. It's at our fingertips. It's the answer. And there's a lot more where she came from. Anyway. Oh no, that's a bit early. Well, look, I'm doing well for 4 minutes. We're going to meet 2 people in a minute who are going to answer and be much more intelligent or, quick, clear. So I will give you something off the cuff. Oh, man. I moved in, so I do this wherever I go. Not talk on bloody stages, but I don't judge people anymore because I've learned constantly I know nothing at all compared to what happens when you listen to everyone. It's collective intelligence, more than the sum of our parts. To me, it's a kind of love. And I learn this every day. I met a guy down in North Devon and I ran a community group down there called Torridge Common Ground. I ran a whole load of assemblies, and you use language that means that people feel welcome, whether it's left wing or right wing, or no wing. And the first time I was talking about it like this, we went for a pint afterwards, and there was a guy going, oh, you know, I'm embarrassed to say I don't know the difference between left or right. That will make you a brilliant counsellor. Oh, don't be stupid, mate. No way. Yeah, it will. Yeah, but you know, my work is really ruptured because I have panic attacks. I'm neurodiverse. Half the customers I'm meant to meet, I'm too terrified to meet. That will make you an even better counsellor. And he's now the deputy mayor of Bideford because he started using assemblies and listening. So this is really good to count down. So listen, this is a moment where I'm going to introduce two people, but I'm going to leave you with something that's an open door if you want to get involved. Research in Germany has shown very clearly that the demographic most likely to go for these new models, citizens' assemblies, the demographic most likely is those who are currently going into the right-wing populists. Research just come out by Sortition Foundation in this country. Reform, 69% of people going for reform will switch to this. In other words, those people, don't call them fascists or idiots. They're in despair. They're not being listened to. They have no agency. This narrative is a better narrative. Dramatic, huh? So can you now welcome these superstars, Professor Jane Souter and Erica Hope. Ta-da!
Hey, Jamie.
So we were all with Delia Smith last night, so we're kind of high on kitchen celebrity. Do you know where we should start on this, actually? The reason, so I'm going to start with you, Jane, if you want. So Delia was incredible, because Delia announced, we had a script for Delia, and she said, no, I don't do scripts. And she just ignored that completely. And welcomed Jane to the table by saying, you're one of the most important people in the world because of the work you've done in Ireland, right? So what was she referring to, Jane? Is it like you're good in the kitchen, or what's going on?
Yeah, deadly Yorkshire pudding. No, so it's obviously not me. It's a lot of people and a huge community. But yeah, Ireland ran some of the first citizens' assemblies in Europe after the Great Recession and austerity and everything. And obviously at that time, the big thing was nobody felt that they were being listened to. The reason Ireland was in such bad shape economically is that the government had just listened to the bankers and the property developers who told them everything was going to keep rolling. And meantime, when it all went belly up, it was ordinary people who lost their houses and their jobs and their savings and everything else. So we managed to persuade the government that like one thing to do is, instead of just spending their whole time listening to vested interest, listening to lobbyists. Like Meta has more lobbyists in Brussels now than Big Tobacco had in its heyday. Like it's bonkers the amount of lobbyists out there for things. That they should actually listen to the people and not just focus groups, not just opinion polls, kind of surface opinion. Actually get people thinking about things. And the really important thing is, like you were saying about facts, you know, the experts come in with the facts, and yeah, that's true, it is based on facts. But the really important thing is actually on values and on empathy and on community. And like I saw earlier there, you had the two men you didn't talk about in your slide.
I left it out. Go on.
You left it out, yeah. So the two guys at the bottom there. So this one here is Chris. So one of our citizens' assemblies was on marriage equality, right? And this had been really contentious. Civil society had been trying to push for marriage equality for ages, but a lot of the conservative politicians were really reluctant to go for it in case they'd face backlash. So we're having this citizen assembly on marriage equality, and Chris here walked into the room and sat down. It's like in a big hotel room, like you're going to a wedding, you know, round tables. And Chris had every one of his fingers painted in a different colour of nail varnish, just to make a point. He was a tech guy in Cork. And then Finbar walked in, the older man here. Finbar is a rural postman, and as you can see, of a completely different generation. And he kind of took one look at Chris, and he kind of, you know, wanted to move away. He went to the far side of the table. He wouldn't even make eye contact with him. He tried avoiding him for a good few weekends after that. And then it was really remarkable on the weekend where everybody was actually voting on whether they were in favour of marriage equality or not. Finbar there is quite shy, right? He'd never stood up in plenary. He'd never stood up when the live streaming cameras were on or anything. And Finbar stood up and he said, I'm going to vote in favour of marriage equality. And he pointed over to Chris and said, you know, I've made such good friends with Chris. I really understand him. I had been really homophobic and anti-gay because I'd been abused as a child by a Catholic priest, and I had always blamed gay men for my abuse, and now I realise that, you know, that wasn't the case. And, you know, Chris is being out to my family home. I met my wife and children for a Sunday dinner, and now they're actually firm friends. And a lot of people listened to Finbar saying that, and it really struck home with them that they had all of these assumptions about the other, that they'd been told about people that they could blame. And in fact, if they met people and they listened to them and they built empathy, then they could change the world. So I think that's one of the crucial things, is this thing about community. And really what we've learned over the decade and more in Ireland where we've done them is about kind of that there is that collective intelligence out there. And if we bring people together and we get them to share their stories, not just listen to facts, but share their stories, build their empathy, talk to each other, listen to each other, they really can come up with solutions. We've had them on climate change. We've had the children of farmers agreeing that, you know, livestock numbers have to be reduced and so on. We had it about abortion in Ireland, which was a really emotive topic. And, you know, rural kind of older men who'd always been against it said things like, well, I hope nobody in my family ever needs it, but I can now see it's not actually my role to stop anybody else having one if they need it. So it becomes more about kindness and about empathy and about collective human experience. So what we need are millions of people coming into the room, talking to each other, listening to each other, building empathy for other humans, and then we need to listen to them. And I think that's really the story of the assemblies.
Kindness and empathy. Thanks so much. How does that feel for you? I'm having such a good time today. So Erica, my friend Erica as well, she covers a very specific area of climate change, of citizens' assemblies. And maybe it's okay to open up on that first, because there's more we'll go on with later. Is that okay?
Sure, with pleasure, thank you. And great to be here. And this is such a nice crowd. It's quite different than the sort of rather staid policy people I normally talk with. You're very enthusiastic. So, I presume I don't need to sort of make the case for the fact that the climate situation is really urgent and that we really have to work on it now. It's serious and undeniable, and, you know, we're going to have a problem if we don't do something about it. So there's that. And we know what we need to do, right? So loads of incredible work has been done to come up with technological solutions, to plot out pathways and roadmaps about all of the changes we need to make right across society, right across economy, in lots of detail. Policy ideas, technology ideas, all of those things are there. And what we need to be doing as societies and communities, and the challenge we've got, is how to make sure that those roadmaps and those ideas are the things that we're following, that we have decisions informed by those things, that we do what we decide, and that as communities and societies we do so in a spirit of embrace and sort of belief and everybody being part of it, because we understand why we need to do it. We've been part of the decision making. We've agreed to it. We understand it. We know the trade-offs. We feel like we've been listened to, and our concerns have been listened to. That our ideas and experiences have been taken account of. And, you know, generally it's a collective endeavour. And so that's, you know, something as big as this. That's a complete rewiring of society can only happen in that sort of context. And when you think about it, our current decision-making processes and structures and institutions are clearly not fit for the task. You know, they are top down, they're based on electoral cycles of 5 years that mean people come into power and are busy thinking about the next election before they sort of even done anything. They are entrenching deeply embedded power imbalances that are already there. You know, people who are already privileged, who are educated, who are articulate and confident, you know, they get to be the ones who decide. The people who are the most affected by climate change really don't even have a voice. You know, it's the young people, it's people in other countries, it's a nation-state-based system, it's the people who aren't born yet, they're not represented in these processes. And of course, it's so open to capture by the vested interests who want things to stay the same as they are. If you think about the lobby power, the revolving doors, and all of those sorts of things. And plus, it's just a lot of complex work needs to be done, and it's just not fine-grained enough, you know, this way of making decisions. And the fact is, the world has changed a lot. The population has grown enormously, but we've still got institutions from the sort of 18th, 19th, early 20th centuries. You know, culture has evolved, technology has evolved, but the institutions have not. And the cool thing about climate is that it provides a really good entry point for actually testing out some of these new ways of doing things. Because even if you haven't done loads of deep thinking about democratic structures, it's very obvious that with the climate transition, you know, we're starting to ask changes that are very close to people now. You know, if you own a shop that is in a city centre where there's a low emission zone and people can't park in your area anymore. If you're a farmer that's done things the same ways for ages and you now need to start changing your practices. If you live in a village and there's going to be a whole load of renewables infrastructure built near you, if you go to school and you can't get meat in your school lunch anymore, if you've been told you've got to put a heat pump in your house and it's really expensive and it's different to use, if suddenly your energy bills are going up partly because of new policies that haven't taken account properly of the distributional effects, all these things are sort of starting to be quite close to home if you work in a sector where you have to suddenly start changing, you know, using very new technologies and things. And these, you know, people have realised this and have started to try and experiment with these processes like citizens' assemblies in service of this. Engaging citizens and making decisions in new ways is so obviously part of what is needed if you're not going to have the backlash that we have started to see. You know, we have farmers in the streets on tractors driving into Brussels. You've got politicians being completely decimated at the ballot box because they dared to support a climate policy. You have media stories blasting out everywhere that are kind of, in some cases, justified, because as a climate community we haven't done a proper job of anticipating and doing these things properly, and in some cases obviously it's weaponization by the people with vested interests, and climate lays itself right open to that. But yeah, so having taken account of all of that, what is nice is that people are waking up to this, and we have got, I think, something like 200 deliberative processes just about climate. Different aspects of the climate crisis have now taken place. There's been, I think, about 20 at national level and loads more at subnational level. In some cases, they're really like, how can our country become climate neutral in a fair way, and in some cases it's more specific. There was one in Poland about energy poverty, there was one in Ireland about biodiversity loss. There's been very many more specific ones at subnational level. And in some cases these are led by governments. There's one going on in the Netherlands right now that's been commissioned by the government. In some cases it's commissioned by civil society. One just finished in Norway that was looking at what are the ethical dilemmas around Norway's oil fund. There's been some in Eastern Europe about air pollution. And so it's really, there are shoots of a movement about this, just even in climate. And as I work for the European Climate Foundation, and we've funded quite a few of these things, we're also funding something called KNOCKA, the Knowledge Network on Climate Assemblies, which has got like 900 members now in 50 countries or something. So this is not just a UK thing, it's not just a European thing. And this is really trying to kind of weave together what we've learned from these. And what we can already say, if I may, is that it's really clear that people can come together who are super different, as Jane was saying, and work well together and come up with, work on really complex topics and come up with really coherent propositions, that they tend to go a lot further than governments do in terms of the things that they ask for. And definitely they have a very transformational effect on the people who take part. So in a world of polarisation, the fact that this is making people feel more engaged and closer to each other is obviously super important. But we're not there yet. We need to learn more how to do them better, how to embed them properly in decision-making structures. But that's, the next phase. And we need more of them to happen, which is why we need a jam.
Why we need a jam, yeah, right on. Yeah, go on. Whoa! So you're getting the picture. I mean, I'm imagining what it's like for you if you've never heard of citizen assemblies. This must be quite interesting, yeah? So, in fact, carrying on from where Erica was, I do see her as one of the pioneers, by the way. I think it's fantastic. Ireland really was held up right at the beginning, particularly with the idea of an example of, you know, if you're a politician in Ireland and you had an opinion about abortion, didn't matter what your opinion was, but you just lost your job. And there are some decisions that are going to have to be made, particularly relating to climate, where every politician is terrified of making those decisions because they'll lose their job. The electorate will not have them. So there's something really valuable in this. And what I'm interested in is, as someone who's been doing it a long time, and in fact, Jane goes around the world, you know, Jane was in Mongolia recently, where there's an amazing one happening there, which you might want to talk about. But I'd be very interested, personally, and I'm sure from the audience's point of view, where's this going to go next? Where do you see this development happening in ways that don't go, okay, politics is over, assemblies is the answer. Where's that transition and how's it going to grow, Jane? Simple question.
Yeah, well, what has to happen, it has to go, like these things are in kind of nerdy academic language called mini publics, because there's 100 people or 200 people or however many are in there, kind of as a microcosm of the wider or the maxi public. And what actually has to happen is that they have to go out into culture, become a way for people to make decisions in schools, in universities, in their lives, in different movements. And we have to be able to look at it. Like, I think one of the problems is that some of them can get a bit embedded, sort of very much kind of institutions and about facts and figures. And Max Boykoff, who's a brilliant climate scientist, you know, said there's no point throwing more facts at a story that isn't about facts, right? We all know that climate disaster is coming. What's the point in throwing more facts at it? That's not going to persuade anybody. So what we have to do is like what you're doing here now, which is about the, you know, trying to launch this game jam, and there's some like really super talented games people at the back, so I'm really excited to see where that goes, where it goes out into culture. I want, in Ireland we had one of those election surveys that countries do after their election recently, and the Citizen Assembly was more trusted than the Parliament or the parties. It was as trusted as the courts and so on. But we need it in other countries where people have actually heard of it, and they think of these different ways of coming together as ways to do it. And as Jamie says, like people on the left or the right, it doesn't really matter. If you're disillusioned with current institutions and current party politics, you're inclined to think, well, actually one way to go is to actually trust the citizens. So I think it would be super great to, you know, really catch on to that and have the people who are feeling disaffected and feeling they're not being listened to, who are going to all sorts of populist movements and finding very convenient enemies, to actually look and see that, well, no, they don't need to go and find those enemies. They can actually start working with people and have their voice heard and be listened to. So I think the only way of doing it is through culture and putting it through wider sort of deliberative society and deliberative systems, rather than just thinking about these as particular institutions, about particular issues. I think that, you know, that's the kind of the first wave, and the second wave now is what I'm really excited to see, about where society and people much more creative than me can take them and build on them and really see them, see the idea of deliberating and listening and looking for collective wisdom among the people. Like just very briefly, in Mongolia they had one. I don't know if you know, but Mongolia is entirely encircled by Russia to the north and China to the south. It doesn't have a land border with any other country. And they're actually like a democracy. And they brought together a mini public of 800 people. So they had nomadic herdsmen from like 3,000 kilometers away from the capital, Ulaanbaatar, who'd never been to Ulaanbaatar before, who came into the presidential palace to talk about these kind of things, as well as, you know, young women from the Gobi Desert and, you know, people from just very, very diverse backgrounds. And one of the things they recommended was actually gender quotas. And Mongolia now, amazingly, has the best gender representation of any country in Asia in its parliament. So, yeah, like all sorts of people can come together about all sorts of issues. And I think that's what we need to do, is just harness the collective wisdom of people and stop thinking that we're powerless because vested interests and lobbyists tell us that.
It's fantastic. There must be some burning questions you've got in your heads, are there? Yeah, that's great noise. So, if our lovely Rosie Termsbird, are you around? Yeah, cool. So, oh look, if I do that, I can see everyone. Oh, hello, everyone. Aren't you bloody gorgeous? Fantastic. See you on a grab, please, and start with someone who identifies as a woman. Brilliant. Fahana, what an honour.
Yeah, hi, thanks, Jamie. Thank you, Erica and Jane. I want to ask a pesky question. I was part of Extinction Rebellion. One of the 3 demands was citizen assemblies. We made huge progress in 2019. I was in Camden, which had the first ever citizens assembly on climate change at the local level, actually, was in August and September, and took part of that. So where were you, foundations and people, and where are you now? Are you really putting in serious money? You're not. The truth is you're not. And this is now 6 years later, so I'm delighted this panel is happening. I'm delighted that we have had so many experiments, but the truth is most of the major philanthropy foundations, the people who are here, are not really backing this in a serious way. And I would like some questions and reflections about that from your side also, and what we can do, Erica, to support you. As someone who works in philanthropy, I know that you're an ally, and that I say this to you as a sister and as an ally. What can we do to help and support the fact that most foundation money, most philanthropy money, most non-profits, most think tanks are dominated by top-down thinking, and we're still funding reports and policy wonks to carry on, not the kind of work that we've just heard about today.
Sure. Thanks. That's a really crucial question. I'm going to take one more question, and then we'll answer both. So, someone else, whoever you got. Thanks, Rosie.
Thank you.
Look at this for Friday morning. Yeah. Hey.
My name's Will Attenborough. I run an organisation called Green Rider, and we're really interested in...
I know you, Will.
Oh, hello. Yeah. Through Belarus Free.
Another plant in the audience, folks. He's going to say, I love your work. No, not really. Come on, Will. Go on.
So, two questions. The first is, we'd really love to put this model into TV and film sets, because we're trying to decarbonise the industry, and it's so ripe for that kind of backlash when it looks like one sort of, zhuzhy actor is pushing for something and everyone else has got to change how they work. So I guess the first question is, how does it work? Like, is that something that we would need training to go and take on ourselves, or can we just sort of go? And the second question is, when you say put it out into culture, how can scripted and drama and comedy and all that kind of stuff, how can that kind of be pulled into that space?
They're really exciting questions, man. Can we start with Fahana, if that's okay? Yeah, thanks, Erica.
Thank you. Hi, Fahana. Nice to see you. And really excellent question. Without easy answers, I would say. So, I mean, speaking from the European Climate Foundation, I like to think we're a little bit ahead of the curve. We have started to try and put money into this since about 2019, in fact. And our CEO actually was the one of the co-leaders of the French Convention, the French National Citizens Assembly. So she's a believer in this. But it's been very slow. You're totally right. Philanthropy is dominated by top-down thinking and very technocratic ways of doing things, and a lot of path dependency and so on. I would say in about the last year, maybe, I start to see a little bit of a shift of people starting to recognise that you need to put effort into the political conditions to do climate action or indeed any other complex problem, and the political conditions and the democratic conditions. And obviously with, frankly, since Trump's election, it's become a lot more like really in everybody's face that this is, that we really need to do something about this. Philanthropy is not a fast-moving world, I would tend to say. You get pockets of it, and there is some brilliant, examples of it, but it's not yet been a kind of complete system shift in the way we're doing things. I was at actually a philanthropy gathering earlier this week, excuse me, and I do see a shift, but I think it's early days for them, and I think people take time to understand what it actually means in practice. Yes, they understand they need to do this, but what then can they intervene in? What can they put money to? So in terms of where the kind of help can come from, I think that sort of making it simple, having a really sort of shared vision in a way from across society and across the arts world and across the technological world and all the others about the sorts of shift that we want to see, so that they aren't confused that there's 25 million different things that they need to support, that actually there's a real red thread of the kind of thing that they need to be coming around. The fact that, showing that there starts to be a movement, so getting involved in something that has a common denominator from lots of different sides. So I think this is where the sort of, deliberative forms of democracy and new forms of democracy and how they can relate to other power structures, that's the sort of thing we need to see. And I think also just being really clear about where the money is needed. So what does intervening actually look like? And just really saying what you've done, standing up and saying that kind of thing, that this is what we need, and probably showing through cultural means and film and TV and all of that kind of thing that these things exist, that they're interesting, that they can be done. So it's not a particularly good answer, but I think those are interesting.
No, thank you. So Will's got a sort of double-edged question. So can he go back to the industry he's in, and how do they run a citizens' assembly to decarbonise his industry? Is it like can you just download a PDF and just run it, or what would he do if you're in his situation, Jane?
Okay, can I first just say 2 sentences about the philanthropy? So when we first started, we were writing all these kind of worthy op-eds in the Irish Times, which is like the Guardian in Ireland, and these philanthropists, Atlantic Philanthropy, actually approached us and said, "Oh, we'll give you money to do it." And we said, "Oh, happy days, give us 50 grand and we'll do something nice." And they kept pushing us until they insisted on giving us $1 million. So as we could really do it properly and like hire people, and they, rented offices for us, and they, hired like the ex-political editor of the public service. It'd be like hiring Emily Maitlis to kind of do your kind of outreach to the politicians and the other journalists and everything. So they, really pushed it. So, like if you have philanthropists with money, and I can introduce you to the Irish ones who actually have that huge imagination and might persuade them. But in terms of the culture, I think, well, no, it's more about how to do it in the film industry, isn't it? Yeah. Okay, well, there's all sorts of, like the Sortition Foundation, DEMSOC, Involve, all these people all have kind of how-to guides on how to do it. But I guess you're probably best off working with one of them. Like one thing that England has, actually, and Scotland, is a whole load of civil society organisations that are really well practiced. They've worked with loads of the local councils, they've worked with loads of different people. And I think if you were going to do it properly in film, it would be really cool. There's some people talking about doing it around gigs in Ireland, because it's obviously hugely carbon intensive, because everybody has to fly over, huge amounts or big containers and so on, especially for like all the summer festivals and everything, and how to do that. But I think some of those civil society organisations would be the best first stop, because it's so easy. Like it's like anything, you know what I mean? Changing a plug the first time you do it, is going to take you forever. Whereas if you've done it 10 times before, you do it with your eyes closed. So I'd go to the experts for that.
Grand, yeah. There's one in this country I'm working with at the moment in Cumbria called Shared Future. Will, listen, do you know what, ladies and gentlemen? If we do, I don't want to be too dark, so I don't know how I'm going to say it without being too dark, but if there is a future for this wonderful species, okay, it will probably be because of processed nerds. And they don't mind me calling them that, by the way. with Will's question, the cultural side of it, that's what One World or None is. So we're little doing baby steps, but already you'll see, you know, we're doing this mobile game launch today with TV, film, and so there is so much opportunity. We had a meeting with a bunch of comedians recently, right? You have this, when you're explaining this to people, it's really interesting watching their faces, yeah, because they go, huh, uh-huh, and then they go, no way! It's really interesting. With artists, with creatives, they have been the first people to come on board straight away. The first person who came on straight away was a director called Asif Kapadia, very quickly followed by Brian Eno, very quickly followed by Mark Rylance. All three of them, they're very, very talented people. They're very, very concerned about the world. And they went, I'm in. What can I do? And when the penny drops for comedy writers, I mean, look at the opportunity. You know, situation comedies are literally unusual people brought together in unusual situations. Off you go. You're going to have a ball. You know, it's Chris and Finbar times 10, you know. So there's so much opportunity. What you want, actually, is members of One World or None coming and giving presentations to creatives and artists, which is one of the things I'm involved in, is something called Hard Art, which is a collective of artists.
Can I just say as well, I think the idea of doing it in the workplaces is also one of the ways that can really, really help to kind of get people to understand. They experience what it's like, and then, you know, there's no better advocate than you've had a go at it.
Yeah, that changes everything. That, you know, the best advocates for this, incidentally, are the participants. I can see a couple of other hands, but we're going to take a break very shortly. But in the next half, there'll be another opportunity for questions. So there will be more questions that can be answered. And also, Eric and Jane are going to be hanging around. But we're coming down to the first end of lap 1, and then there'll be lap 2. And we're going to have a comfort break in a minute. But I just want to say, from the bottom of my heart, Jane Suter and Eric, I hope you're bloody marvellous. Thank you so much indeed. Sarah Goodenough and Kim out there, the people running this, you're also bloody marvellous. And Sharon, who's put this up, thank you so much indeed. And